hit record there. So I know we have some people who aren't able to make it at this time, and they're going to watch the replay. So, all right. So let me share my screen and we will get started. And we go to slideshow and there we go. And share. All right. Ready? You can see the slides okay? Great. So thank you for being here. I'm Paulina Cossette. I am the owner and founder of Acadia Editing Services, and I'll start out telling you a little bit about me and my story, and then we'll get into these the framework that I teach in my program, Becoming an Academic Editor or Coach. I'm going to show you that you're not alone in your struggles in academia because I've been there and I know how challenging it can be. And by the end of this hour, you'll have learned what academic editing and coaching involve, how you can find freelance jobs and clients, and how working with me in my program, Becoming an Academic Editor, can help you earn $100 an hour or more during your first year as an editor or coach. Even, as I said, if you're just working 5 hours a week as a side hustle. In addition, I will choose two of you at random if you're willing to volunteer to talk with you about your thoughts and answer your questions and give you sort of a back of the napkin plan for going forward if that's something that you're interested in doing with your business, if that's, if you're willing to share with us. So, a little bit about me. I was a U.S. politics professor. I grew up in Florida. I had two tenure track jobs before I left academia in 2019. And, I did everything that I was supposed to do. I published articles, I co-authored a book before I left. I had great teaching evaluations. I did all the service, right? I was doing all the things that I was supposed to do. But I was so incredibly stressed out and burnout. And I was giving and giving and giving so much of myself and getting nothing back. I did have students that I loved who were wonderful, but there were many who were always plagiarizing or cheating or complaining or grade grubbing or, I don't have to go through it. You know how it is. Um, and more importantly, I did not get support from administrators. They were always more concerned with getting tuition dollars and keeping students than they were with protecting faculty. And when I had my son, I was working 7 days a week. It was exhausting. I was not getting any sleep because I had a little baby. I had a great maternity leave and it was wonderful. But when I went back to work, it was just unbearable. And on top of that, my husband and I were living in a place that we didn't like. We were far from our family. And we were just very unhappy in that situation. Around this same time, my mother-in-law was diagnosed with lung cancer. And something I've talked to a lot of people who experience this, that having some kind of crisis like that or health issues or some kind of change in your family situation um, really puts in perspective what your priorities are, and it really sort of forces you to reframe what it is you want out of life. And so that's what I was experiencing at this time in 2019. We wanted to move back to Maine, where my husband grew up, to be closer to family, but I also knew that the chances of getting an academic job there were very slim. So I finally reached my breaking point, as I said, when I was working 7 days a week, and I just felt like I was drowning. And in the summer of 2019, I finally broke. I remember thinking that going back to teaching in the fall it made my stomach churn. But at the same time, I felt this intense guilt about letting people down, like my students and my colleagues, and even my grad school advisors, which looking back is just such a crazy thought. But this conflict inside me between wanting to fulfill my needs and yet my intense fear of letting other people down created this perfect storm of crippling anxiety. And I was terrified to leave, but I also knew that I couldn't go back to teaching in the fall. So in July of that year, we said, the heck with it. We're just going to leave. We're going to do what's right for us and for our family. So that's what we did. I knew that things had to change, and I finally made the decision to do that. And, after we moved to Maine, I applied to a bunch of non-academic jobs, but I kept getting told things like I was overqualified, or I would get interviews and that would just always go to somebody else, like, you're not the right fit, or they didn't think I was going to stay for a long time, or I don't know what it was. But thankfully, I had just published my book and I had worked with a freelance copy editor with the publisher. And before that, I had no idea that copy editors even existed. Um, and so it was through this, random connection that I ended up starting copy editing because, my husband had a job. I was lucky about that, but you can only be unemployed for so long before you need to start bringing in some money and, not go crazy sitting at home all day by yourself. Um, and so I figured, I'm a good writer and I'm good at editing and I have this research background and I know what scholarly papers should look like. And I decided I could do this for a little while until I landed, quote unquote, a real job. Well, for about 6 months, I spent hours online sorting through job ads for copy editors. And if you've ever tried Googling something like remote work editor or anything like that, you know that it's very difficult to make sense of the search results and all the companies that show up and to figure out what's a scam and what's worth your time and what's not. Um, but eventually I did figure it out and I got some freelance positions with several editing agencies and academic presses. Excuse me. And I spent this was like early 2020 when I started this search. And so of course COVID was happening too, and I was very glad to be working from home. But it took probably 2 or 3 years before I really understood this landscape and could find companies that paid better because a lot of these editing agencies and publishers pay 1 cent a word or less, it's very difficult to survive on that. Um, and looking back, I realized that it never should have taken that long. The problem was that I didn't have any guidance. There's like editors groups on Facebook and you can find little blog posts and stuff on the internet, but there was nothing and no one out there to show me here, this is what you need to do. This, work at this company, don't work at that company. And like now that I've been there, I can look at an editing agency and I could tell you, here's the questions you need to ask so you don't waste your time. Um, but when I was going through this, there was just nothing out there to help me figure out this landscape. And so, as I said, I eventually cracked the code. And for the last 2 years, I have had tremendous success, more success than I ever expected. And I'm so grateful for that. My client base multiplied rapidly. In 2022, I started at the end trying to work with private clients. I had just 6 private clients that year. And last year, 2024, I had 55 private clients, and many of them booked me for multiple projects. I've also turned a lot of people away in the last year because I just don't have the time to take them on. And so for me, looking back at academia and my whole journey, for me, the best part about freelancing, besides earning 6 figures and working just 30 hours a week last year, is that I'm able to schedule work when I want to do it. If my kids are sick and they need me, obviously, if I have a tight deadline, I do have to do the work, but that's very rare that those two things kind of come together. 99% of the time, if my kids are sick, I can take the day off when I need to and focus on them and be there for them. Or, I schedule in advance. Next week, we're actually leaving on a cruise to go to the Caribbean, and I'm taking 10 days off where I'm not even going to open my email that whole time. And so, that this for me is freedom, right? A lot of people talk about academia and how the schedule is flexible. And I'm sorry, but when you're working 7 days a week, that's not flexibility, right? And so that's what I love the most about this business is that I'm my own boss. I have no more burnout. I work when I want to, and I love the work. I love working with my clients too. So I'll stop there with my story. The point of sharing all of this with you is so you can see that it is possible to have a life that you've always wanted. I think a lot of people who are still in academia, we still believe that story that like we're supposed to work all the time and publish and, get burnout and that's just normal. And I want to tell you as somebody who's on the other side that that's not normal and it's not healthy. And if you are looking for something else, it's out there and you absolutely can have it. So today, I'm going to start by explaining what I mean by academic editing and coaching. I'll tell you about the skills that you already have that make you well suited to launch an editing or coaching business. I'll also walk you through my framework for that I teach in becoming an academic editor. And it's basically a three-step process for launching your business, again, either as a side hustle or as a full-time career. And then finally, as I said, I'll choose two volunteers if you're willing to talk to me about your situation, and I can sort of walk you through and help you make a plan for how you might go forward with the type of business that you're wanting to start. I also have plenty of time at the end to take questions, so please feel free to ask anything that you're curious about, from leaving academia to editing to whatever it might be. So first, there are two main types of editing. Uh, there's a lot of different ways to define the types of editing out there, but this is basically how it breaks down, particularly for academic editing. First, you have developmental editing, which involves looking at the big picture of a text. Usually, this is a book, but it doesn't have to be. It could be a journal article too. But usually, with a book, a developmental editor will sit down and they'll read the manuscript and they will tell the author in a written report. Where they need to change things. What do they need to change? Do they need to strengthen the thesis? Is there a clear narrative thread where the thesis is constantly being supported throughout the text? Does each chapter of the book have a clear thesis that also supports the main argument of the book? Do they need to add more evidence somewhere or more literature? Those kinds of big picture organizational structural type questions is what we think of as developmental editing. And often, developmental editors will pair this with book coaching because I'm sure you can see how that goes hand in hand, where you could present the author with a report on what they need to change, but also it's helpful to have a conversation. And so you would charge for the developmental editing work and the report, and then you could also charge for, say, a 30-minute or 60-minute Zoom call where you walk them through, help them make a plan to make these changes in the text. The other type of editing is what we call copy or line editing. And this is more of the red pen types of edits that we think of, where you're going through each sentence, you're making sure that you're checking for typos, you're correcting punctuation and grammar errors, you're making sure that the arguments are clear in the text. You're revising the wording to improve the flow. And it also includes formatting for like if the journal guidelines require certain heading styles and those kinds of things, and editing the references list to whatever the citation style is that they're using. So this is more of the nitty gritty, getting into the meat of the text and doing those kinds of red pen edits. So where do academic editors work? Well, as I mentioned earlier, one common place for people to start out working as freelance editors is with what we call editing agencies. And these are companies like Enego and Scribendi and Edans and Taylor and Francis and Cambridge. Like all these publishers now seem to have an office in their, their big um, corporate world that they have where basically what happens is these companies hire freelance editors like you and me to work for them and they solicit projects from clients. And so many of these clients around the world are English language learners. They upload their paper to the website. The company sends the project to you. You do the edits and you return it to them. And so the advantage of these is that you have work coming directly to you. You don't have to do any marketing. You know exactly what you're going to get paid. It's almost always a per word rate. Um, the downside is that the rate is not very good. It's usually it's around 1.5 cents per word is what you can expect to earn from a decent editing agency. Now, the other option for you to work as a freelancer is directly with academic journals or book publishers. The journals are quite a bit harder to get those jobs as a freelancer because there's a lot of competition. There's huge variation in terms of the pay and the amount of work you have to do. I've worked for two different journals, and in one, it was very straightforward. They would send me the Word documents, I would copy edit them, and I'd send them back, and that was it. Another one, I had to do all the interactions with the authors and, send them my edits and incorporate their revisions, and that was a lot of work. So it's quite a different landscape, and there's a lot of variation there. Book publishers, so I worked for Routledge and Edward Elgar. Uh, Typically, the writing that you're editing is much higher quality because the books have been accepted for publication, but the rates that they pay are quite low, and you often have to do quite a bit of formatting to the publisher's style. Um, but they are options, right? There are options for steady work to come in where the company that you work for is sending you the projects and you don't have to go out and do marketing on your own. And so it's sort of a good way to start with these types of places to practice your editing skills and not have to worry about like posting on Instagram and all that stuff that most people don't really like to do anyway. Finally, there are private clients, right? And so once you develop your skills as an editor, um, the private clients is who you want to work for because this is where you're going to make quite a bit more money. When I was starting out with private clients, I think I charged around 3 cents per word. Nowadays, I charge 7 to 8 cents per word. So as you get more experience, you can charge more and you also start to edit a lot faster. And I'll get to that in just a minute. This is mainly faculty, graduate students. A lot of dissertations are a great place to start practicing editing with private clients. Then, of course, the challenge is that you have a lot more of the administrative type stuff like writing a contract and developing invoices and sending emails back and forth with the client. And so it's kind of this other layer of owning a business that can be a bit challenging if you're still trying to get used to editing itself. But it is sort of the holy grail of the work that you want to end up doing. In terms of coaching, there are all different types of coaching. This is an industry that I think really exploded during COVID, not just with academic or editing. There's all kinds of like fitness coaches and wellness and meditation, all that stuff out there nowadays. But even in the academic space, I'm seeing a huge explosion of people who have left academia and gone into industry, and they've worked at places like Meta and Microsoft or wherever doing UX and all that kind of stuff. And then they leave and they become a coach and they help academics leave and get industry jobs. But there's also options like being a writing coach, helping scholars, like say junior faculty, to develop a writing practice that can help them become successful and, achieve their publishing goals. Um, there's a woman named Laura Portwood Stacer who's very famous in this space for, she has a book called The Book Proposal Book, which is fantastic. And she coaches authors in how to write quality book proposals. I have a student, a member of our community, who is a trained executive function coach, and so she worked with me in our program to develop her niche, to create a website, to learn how to do all of this kind of marketing. And she works now with grad students and junior faculty who have ADHD, and she helps them to develop strategies to be more successful with publishing and writing and all of that. Um, and it's just, I mean, the sky is the limit. You really are limited here by your imagination. I also wanted to mention there's somebody in our cohort now in January who, her dissertation was on relationships between PhD advisors and their graduate students and how do they work together. And she decided from her own experience that she didn't want to go into academia. And so now she's thinking about developing a coaching business, um, where she teaches faculty how to be better supervisors. And so we are still exploring how she's going to create that for herself and what's going to work for her. But it's just an example of how you can take your expertise, whatever area it's in, whatever you're skilled at, and if you can teach that to other people, then you can be a coach. So, what skills does an editor need? It's good if you're a strong writer. For copy editing, especially, you need to have an eagle eye and an understanding of grammar. I have talked to many editors who have done, if they have an academic background, they've done an editing certificate program like the University of Chicago, or I think San Diego has one. And they say it really wasn't necessary. Like it's a nice to have, but it's not a must have. Um, because I feel, and what I have heard from so many people, is that when you have this academic training, especially if you have publishing experience, you don't have to though, you know what it takes to publish scholarly work. You know what strong scholarly writing sounds like. Um, and so you don't need to go get an editing certificate, right? You just need to learn how to apply your existing skills in a new context of being a full-time or a professional paid editor. It's also helpful to have people skills, to be flexible, to be kind, to be supportive. I think that a lot of people with an academic background who become editors are really successful because we have empathy and we know what it feels like to be struggling to finish your dissertation or to be facing a stack of, papers that you need to submit to journals and you're just overwhelmed and overworked. And um, because you understand what that feels like, you're able to be so much more helpful and supportive with your clients. As I said, you have these skills, right? You've done all of these things. You probably supervise student research, you grade essays, you co-author, you do peer review. All of this stuff that you do in your daily life as an academic is editing, right? We don't call it editing. We call it all of these other things when we're in academia. But you have all those skills. You have this innate sense of what academic writing should look and sound like. And so it's very easy to transfer those skills into this new setting. So I've talked about this a little bit, but I'll break it down in a bit more detail before we get on to the coaching. And I will say that specifically for editors, the 3 steps to get started is first to draft a one-page resume, because you will need this if you want to apply to editing agencies or to book publishers. And so inside our program, I give you the template. I show you exactly how to translate your academic training and experience into the language that it needs to be in a one-page resume that goes for these editing jobs. Again, you have the experience already. You just need to frame it as the way that we speak in, the editing world. And so I give you that template, and I also give individual feedback, going through your resume, helping you spruce it up, giving you comments and stuff before you apply. And as I said, I don't think you need an editing certificate. I consider working for these agencies and publishers as on-the-job training. When you're a freelancer for them, you're practicing these editing skills, you're getting feedback from the company, and that is all you need to start to hone your editing skills in this new context before you go on to start working with private clients. Step two is to start networking. So while you are working for these editing agencies and starting to improve your editing skills, you start working your existing network. You talk with your colleagues. You connect with people on LinkedIn. In the program, I show you how to develop a basic web page. It's nothing complicated. It's very simple. And we talk about the structure of how to set that up. I also go over how to send cold emails to other people, to other academics that you may not know. And so as you are building your skills with these editing agencies, you're also starting to plant these seeds with other potential private clients that you will water and they will grow over time, right? And I'll give one quick example with cold email. I got an email last month from somebody, and he was replying to a cold email that I had sent him a year ago. And he said he didn't remember how he found me, but he had my webpage bookmarked for this whole time. And so that goes to show you that you can reach out to people and you may not hear back right away, but you know how it is with publishing. We don't publish a book every day. They remember you, they bookmark you, they save the email, and when they're ready, they reach out and contact you. So as I said, as you're getting this editing experience with the agencies, you're planting these seeds and networking, and they all will start to pay off, a few months down the road when you're ready to start taking on more of these clients. So sorry, as you are building these skills, you're gradually increasing your editing speed. When you go on to take private clients, you raise your rates slightly over time. As I said, I recommend charging a per word rate because that tells the client exactly what they're going to pay up front. You don't quote them an hourly rate that they don't know what the project is going to cost because a lot of people have research funds and they're limited to, I have $1,500 and that's what I'm limited to, or whatever the case may be. You build up your skills in Microsoft Word. And over time, you are, especially with these per word rates, you're able to increase your effective hourly rate. So, when you're starting out, let's say you have a project that somebody pays you $1,000 to edit, and maybe it takes you, many, many hours to do that edit. And then later on, even if you don't raise your rates at all, you have another project that's $1,000, but you're much faster at editing it, your effective hourly rate is going to be much higher. And so you can get to the point where you are earning $100 an hour or more working on these projects. And if you quoted a client $100 an hour or $150 an hour, they might be like, whoa, that's a lot of money. And so that's why I advocate, there are many reasons, but among them, that's why I advocate the per word rates, because you know what you're making hourly, and it's really nobody else's business what you're making hourly. As long as you're delivering a quality product, that's all that should matter to the client. And, I work with a lot of the members in my group about breaking down these, in academia, we're always voluntold to do stuff, and the work is piled on us, and yet the end of the year comes and we're told we're not getting a raise. There's no money for raises. And there's a lot of work that people in our community have to do to sort of break down this feeling of owing people their time. without getting paid for it. And so that's another aspect of the work that we do in our Zoom calls each week is me sort of convincing the members that you shouldn't do free labor. You shouldn't do free work. You should get paid what you're worth. You have a graduate degree, you have tremendous expertise and skill. You deserve to make over $100 an hour. And in fact, nowadays, the rate I usually end up making is around $150 an hour, sometimes 200. So you definitely can get there. It's totally possible. And frankly, you deserve it because you are an educated, skilled, talented person. If you are primarily interested in coaching, um, the process that we go through is very similar, but obviously you're not going to be applying to editing agencies if you're not looking to be an editor. And so what we start out in the program is to define your niche. Who is it that you're going to serve, and what problems are you going to solve for them? And that can be a little tough because it's a bit amorphous, right? It's you're not sure of what you want to do in the beginning, and that's okay. So there are some exercises that we go through with like creating your website and some other things that are ways for you to get your ideas down on paper and start to develop an offer that you can put out into the world, right? How much you're going to charge, what is the coaching going to include? This month, I just added a brand new coaching module to the course. So I have a whole set of videos that are specifically dedicated to answering these questions and giving you exercises to work through to try to help you develop your niche and your offer and all of those things. The second step for coaching is similar to editing, and that you're going to work your network and go through these different ways to try to attract clients and connect with colleagues and even send cold emails. And so the image on here is from Julia, who was one of our first members. She started in July. She's the one that I mentioned as an executive function coach. And, this is an example of an offer that she came up with, promoting herself to students who need help writing their I think it was the letters to apply to college or something like that. And so, she puts this offer out there on LinkedIn and people contact her. She has a link for them to book. And there you go. You've got, even if they're just, one-off 30 or 60-minute appointments, those are your clients. And they may come back to you year after year for whatever it is that they need. And then the third step for coaching is to clarify your framework, right? When you go in to become a coach, you typically have some kind of framework for how you teach this knowledge or these skills or whatever it is that you're working with your clients. And again, the theme is charge what you're worth. And I said this to Julia during a coaching session and I have the permission to share this story. She felt bad about charging people money to give them this advice that she had been giving for free for so long as a professor, as an instructor. And I said, I forbid you from charging less than $100 an hour, even as a beginning coach, because you pour so much of yourself and your time and your knowledge and your skills and everything into these people that you are coaching. You deserve to be paid for it. So I've talked about becoming an academic editor. It is a self-paced digital course that you get lifetime access to. There's now 7 modules in the course, including that new coaching one. And I will, if I can find the chat window here, I will post the link for you to get some more information. Oh, there we go. Here's the link. And so you get lifetime access to the course and the community. We have a community in Thinkific, which is the learning management system that I use. And we also started a Slack channel, which has actually been like a very active and fun chat room where we all kind of talk with each other throughout the day. The course itself includes videos, templates like the resume. I give you templates for a contract, for an invoice, citation style cheat sheets. I mean, there's like 30 or 40 resources at this point, and I'm always adding new things. And we do It's done on a cohort model. So we just started our January cohort last week. We meet once a week for 12 weeks. The next cohort starts in March. I've capped each cohort at 10 people to keep the group small. Two of the March spots are already sold. And the January cohort booked up like the first week of December. So they're booking like a month in advance um, for these groups. Um, I mentioned the community and the Slack channel. And so the 12 weeks of group coaching, we meet every week for an hour. You can ask questions. There's a recorded replay that I send out right after the meeting. And then you talk during the week on Slack or in Thinkific. And so when you finish the course, you have a plan and tools for starting your business. You know the basics of academic editing and coaching and how to find clients, and you belong to this supportive community of people who get it, who understand because they've all gone through the same things. We all come from the same places, and we all have similar values and goals. Um, the investment for the course is $14.97. As I said, there are 8 spots left for March. And because you are here today, to thank you for participating, I have this limited time offer that's going to expire tomorrow, or there's only 3 options. So there's only three available. So either tomorrow or when those 3 get sold. If you enroll in the course today, you will get a free 60-minute coaching call with me. That's a $200 value. And you will get my Essential Skills for Academic Editors course for free. That's if you buy it when you enroll in the course, it's normally 97, or if you buy it later, it's 197. That is so I do want to be clear here that the Becoming an Academic course does not teach you how to edit. I assume that you know what quality writing looks like and you know how to edit scholarly documents. So I'm not teaching you grammar and things like that. I'm teaching you how to get jobs and find clients and start an editing business. But there was a need for there were some people who needed a bit more help with Microsoft Word. And so that's where I introduced this Essential Skills course. Those are 3 hours of video screen shared walkthroughs where I show you step by step how to format a dissertation, create a table of contents, all that kind of stuff. So that's the difference there. But I do want to make sure you understand that with Becoming an Academic Editor, I'm not teaching you how to edit or, grammar rules or anything like that. So, okay, let me close my, I'll stop sharing my screen. There we go. Okay. Um, I'm sure you probably have questions about the program, but before we get into that, is there anybody who would like to tell me about where you are in this journey? What are you thinking in terms of your business? And I can sort of walk you through a plan for how to get started. Just you can raise your hand, or you turn on your video and like physically raise your hand or anything like that. Any Kristen, so good to see you. Thank
Hi. I'll go.
Yes, please.
I'd like to start part-time because I have to stay at my current job for the next 2 years while my daughter finishes college because I have a tuition benefit but as a goal, I would really love to not need the tuition benefit to put my next daughter through college. Who, she's 7 years younger, so we've got time. But I have felt so tied to my job, and I would really like to start this on the side, but within 2 years with a goal of making it full time. So I don't know what are the ways that I might start it on the side is I guess my question. Just
Yeah, so I remember you ta telling me about your kids, and I
Yeah.
think you were traveling recently or something when we were emailing. But
Yeah.
so you've never done paid editing before, right? Okay.
No.
So what I would suggest then is exactly what I've walked through in this talk today is to apply to some editing agencies. The You could apply to book publishers too, but obviously editing a book is going to require more time. And if you're still, if you're teaching during the semester, I think with the editing agencies, those tend to send you, a 5,000 or 8,000 word manuscript. And they give you 4 or 5 days or something to do it. And so, and they're very flexible in that you can say, look, I can only edit one article a week or something like that. And then in the summer, if you have more time, you can tell them you can take on more work. And so I think that is a great way to get started to see if you like it. You apply to, normally I recommend Scribendi, but they're not hiring right now. I have in the course, I have a big Google sheet with about 150 of these companies. And as the members of our group apply to different places or find new places, they add them to the sheet so that you can see what each company pays, if they're hiring, any kind of notes on what the experience was like avoid this place or whatever. Um, and so you make your resume, you apply to a few of these agencies, you get hired, and you just start practicing with that editing, and you see how you like it, and you start taking on more projects. And as you're doing that, you start connecting with people. If you're comfortable working your own network, you can write your colleagues and say, "Hey, I'm taking up some editing work on the side." You don't have to tell them that you want to leave or anything like that. Just hey, I'm taking on some editing work. Do you have a paper, I could work on for you? And you give them a quote and you do it, right? And that's how you expand, right? And then you post on LinkedIn about, projects or hi Kitty. I've seen so many people's cats doing these talks every week. It's okay. Sometimes my kids are here too. Um, so that's the strategy, I think. And then, we work with you to make a web page and you just kind of gradually get your name out there and you take on as many projects as you're comfortable with. And once you get in the groove of editing, if you decide you love it and you want to drop the, drop the main job, you just you get eventually you get to a point where you have so many clients coming in that you can't take them all, and whatever that schedule looks like for you. Does that help?
It does. So you feel like 2 years is a reasonable time to get to that point,
Oh
depend.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, so I mean, it depends on how much time you have in your schedule, but I will say when I first started just working for editing agencies, my kid was like 18 months old and I worked about 20 hours a week. I made $45,000 that first year. Um, the next year I had my daughter, so I took 3 months off and I
Mhm.
made 45,000 again just in 9 months. And still like working 20 hours a week. My mom would come over and watch the kids and stuff. My third year, I think I made 60. I matched, that's basically what I was making as faculty. It was like 62,000. Um, Last year I made 75 and never work, I don't work more than 30, 35 hours a week. And last year, 2024, I finally cracked 100,000. So, yes,
Ah,
like I would not be making that as a professor at Washington College. They're a really great school. My complaints about academia are mainly with the first university I was at, but so yeah,
thank you. That's really helpful.
sure.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to go? Or if nobody wants to share their information, I'm happy to take any questions. And if you want to keep your screen off, that's totally fine. Any questions about the program or editing in general or leaving academia or anything like that?
Is there anything you miss about it?
Academia?
Yeah.
Uh,
No?
I don't, no, no, there's not. I think when I was just editing, like I was about probably like 2023, so like 3 to 4 years into editing by myself. And I did feel a little bit lonely, like I miss my husband goes to work. He's a medical researcher. He goes to his lab and he has his friends that he works with every day. And I work from home, which I really like working alone. It's fine. But I did miss having these kinds of interactions. And that's about the time that I got the idea for this course. And so I think doing that kind of coaching in the course and having, webinars or whatever you want to call this, that that has fixed that. Like I've been networking with other there's a group of like a messenger group that I've created with other women who are coaches, like they're all from academia and now they do coaching of all different varieties. And we just meet once a month on Zoom and talk about our businesses and subject line strategies, like all this weird stuff that you'll get into as you start to build a business. But yeah, so I think that's what I missed. But no, it was just so exhausting, and if I'm talking too much, please somebody jump in and ask a question. But I've been thinking a lot recently, and I'm kind of toying with the idea of a book, but like, why are there those of us who get tired of academia? Why do we get burnout? Why are there people like my best friend who is a finance professor and she makes way more than I did, so maybe that's why she doesn't want to leave, but she likes it, like why are there people who like it and then there's those of us who don't? And the thing that I've come up with is like we pour so much of ourselves. We're emotional people. We pour so much into teaching, into advising, into committee service. We do it all and we feel guilty when we're not doing it all. And yet, when you have a student like I did who's like making violent threats, the university does nothing. They're like, sorry, there's nothing we can do. And I'm going, what do you mean? Like you want us to give everything that we have, and yet you don't give us this basic protection or like a raise, like just with inflation. Um, and that for me, I think is what it came down to. And so in my business, I don't pour nearly as much effort and time into my business, but when I do, it's for me. Like every hour I spend on Zoom, I'm helping people and they're grateful and it's paying off for me. Everything I invest is for the long term. It's not for an administrator or an ungrateful student or a sexually harassing colleague or whatever, that we all have to deal with. So, yeah, I think that probably I hear from people that resonates for a lot of people and
I have a question.
yeah.
Um, I was just curious. I know, like, when I was younger, people say with writing, like, good enough is good enough. How do you stop yourself from being like overly perfectionist about your editing job? Like, how do you know when it's good enough and that you're not overdoing it and spending?
No, that's a great question. So I have noticed in our community that when when people are starting out as editors, they feel like they have to go above and beyond and spend all this extra time on a document. And so there is a little bit of a battle there. Like especially when you're new, you want to do good work. You want your client to be happy. But I think that for me, I think it's easier to detach because it's not your paper. Like when someone sends you a project, they send you the journal style guide and all that. And so you get into this workflow and this pattern that you're used to doing for every project where, you know, pun intended, you dot all the I's and cross all the T's. And, you first go down and you format the text and you read it to make sure that it's clear and you leave comments. And in my practice, I only offer one round of editing. So I will not get into a situation where I send the author the edits and they send them back. And like, I'm not your co-author. That's not my job. I do one round of edits. I send it back to them. If they have questions, I'm always happy to answer the questions, to clarify why I did something. But the vast majority of people just take it and they're grateful. You've usually authors are in this place where they're stuck. They feel like they've stared at this paper for weeks and weeks and weeks, and that it's just all a blur to them. And to have somebody get fresh eyes on it, um, you're able to add so much value in that one round of editing that that's enough for them. Oh, you're on mute.
When you make comments and stuff, are you concerned with your tone, like not sounding too harsh and stuff?
Yeah, so the advice that I always, and that's, how I learned to edit was working for these editing agencies, and they have these quality control people who will give you feedback, which is why I say you don't need an editing certificate because you're basically getting that advice, from the agency. One of the suggestions was that don't use I or you in your comments. So, if you're leaving a comment, don't say, I think you need to do XYZ here. I mean, as I've gotten more experienced and if I know the client, I'm less concerned about it because they know me and they know I'm just trying to help. But when I'm leaving a comment, I'll say revised for clarity or that in which people mix those up quite a lot. I'll give an explanation that doesn't say you need to do this or and you kind of depersonalize it and you make it about the text. But
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Sometimes I think I can be too blunt and it can probably come across as harsh, but
And I
um
think, go ahead.
I had another question, but I blanked on it. Um, do you still do peer-reviewed stuff? Do you still like review for journals?
You mean do I work directly for journals
No.
or do
Um,
I edit
like
journal
long,
articles?
no, like being a reviewer for a journal.
Oh, no. No, 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 no. That was another joy. As soon as I left, I remember like probably a month after I left, I got an email asking me to review an article, and I was like, sorry, not in academia anymore. Not my, like I didn't say it, but in my head, I was like, not my problem. Yeah, no, that's a huge difference between academia and business is you don't do work if you're not getting paid for it. We don't do free labor around here. I mean, if you find that fun,
Really?
go for it.
No,
But
I was curious. Thank you.
yeah, no, that's a whole, publishing is such a mess. Yeah, no. Yeah. And that's, when I started this group, I did not anticipate the amount of mental work that people would have to do. And I remember our first cohort that we started in July last year. It was like, I want to say it was like 16 people enrolled and only 8 would show up every week. But we became such a tight-knit group because everybody had these horror stories of what they had been through and just that there is work that needs to be done with changing your identity. You think of yourself as a professor or a scholar or whatever, and a lot of the work that we do, like creating your resume and developing your website, is it's a tangible exercise, but as you think through it, I think it has the effect, and I'm not a psychologist, but I think it has the effect of helping you cross that bridge, like you're meant as you're working through your resume and reframing your experience in this new context, you're mentally making that progress towards this new identity. Um, so but you can get there, and I promise you it is so much better on the other side. And if any of you are happy in academia, that's great. I don't have a problem with people being professors. I loved the work in concept, right? In theory. I loved the idea of being a professor, and I loved the students that I had who cared, but there was just so much other stuff that was, it eats away at your life. And I didn't want to live like that, especially having kids and a family. And I remember my father-in-law saying to me that we'd come up to Maine to visit, and he would say, "I've never seen you on vacation without your laptop out." And he wasn't being mean. He was just being honest. And I was like, "Ugh, I know, I gotta write though. It's Christmas break. I've got to write." And now it's like, I don't work on the weekends. I don't take my tablet or laptop on vacation. We're going on a cruise, and no, I might film some B-roll for reels and stuff on Instagram, like of us on the beach, but that's about it. Oh, okay. You don't know anybody who has the money to pay for editing. Oh, okay. Sorry, let me catch up in the chat. Constantly talking about AI. Uh, yes. So who did I, um, there was an article. I'll have to look up the article and I can try to share it with you. But there was a really great piece. I have an article on my blog about why I think AI is not going to replace editors. And it's because ChatGPT and those other tools are really terrible with editing. Like if you ask, in the blog, I put in some text and said, can you edit this for clarity or whatever? And it was awful. Like it introduced new errors that weren't there. And but the other thing is that I mentioned like having empathy and stuff, like when you're dealing with legitimate scholars, which is eventually what you want to get to, is working with faculty because they are the ones that have the budgets. Many of my clients pay me with research funds or, their whatever grant money they get. And they're they're quality writers. They don't want ChatGPT to edit their papers, like, and they value the support and the just like the coaching that they get, even just in an editing relationship. Even grad students, when I edit somebody's dissertation, they are so grateful because if you remember being at that point in your career, you're exhausted, you're drained, and like you don't know what to do. And to have to format your dissertation is just a nightmare, because you're pouring from an empty cup at that point. And so um to have somebody who is not judging you like your supervisor would, right? Or your PI or whatever. Um, to have somebody who's like a neutral party that you can go to and ask questions and just be honest and vulnerable with, and they'll give you honest, supportive feedback is, I mean, it's gold, it's worth so much more than you actually charge them. And you can't get that from AI, and I think what we're seeing is a lot of people who are English language learners, they would normally go to these editing agencies and pay them to have a freelancer edit their paper. But to save money, they're going to ChatGPT or whatever and asking it to edit. But because they just don't have those English and grammar and writing skills, and it's not just, non-native speakers, it's anyone who is just not a great writer or doesn't have a good command of the language. Um, when ChatGPT edits it, they don't know that it's wrong. And so they're putting in this paper and they're getting out stuff that's garbage and they just don't know because they don't have those skills. And so as far as like I don't know anyone who has the money to pay for editing, there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of scholars around the world, and they don't um Yeah, that's funny. Somebody emailed you to ask if you'd work as an editor. See? I'm like a lucky charm, aren't I? Hang out with me and the work just appears. Um, well, you should enroll in the course. Come on. What was it? Oh, I think there's this like dirty secret of working with an editor that like I mean when like I said when I was a professor I didn't know that editors existed and nobody talks about it but I like I said I had 55 clients last year. I know other people who have somebody else I know had 40 some clients last year. So uh they're out there, they're hiring us, they're just not talking about it. So there's more than enough work than you could handle and for all of us, and it's great to be part of this community because we share work. I will give you, there's a page on my website that I post the anybody who enrolls in the course is welcome to give me their information and be added to that page. Um, but you see there an example of some of the members of the community and the websites that they've created. Um, and so I do a lot of marketing in, or not paid, but like chatting with people in Facebook groups and stuff. And uh, I don't really take on a lot of grad students these days because they just have smaller budgets. And so I will direct them to that page and say, hey, here's a list of editors you can look at. And a lot of my community members have gotten work through that. Any other questions or thoughts or
The the pay per the cents per letter, like half cent, 3 cents, 7 cents you mentioned, is that the total word count in the paper?
yeah, so it's I always describe to clients that it's any of the text that you want edited is what goes into the
Oh,
word
so they
count.
can specify, yeah, chunk or something. Okay.
Yeah, and
And then you use like track changes or something.
yeah.
I kind of wonder, I feel like some of the struggle sometimes is getting the word count down. How much do people, instead of just like formatting a grammar, ask you to like reduce the word count?
Um,
Or do you
I'm
avoid that?
No, no, I will do it. I would say maybe probably like 15% of client, 20% of clients maybe will include that in their request. Um, obviously there's only so much I can do. Um, so I will, I have a limit, like I'll cut up to 20% of your text or something like that. I did once have a professor, she's actually a journal editor, so she's like the editor of one of the main journals in political science. She hired me to cut just to cut. Like she didn't want me to edit her paper per se. She just couldn't figure out how to cut her article down to the word count, so she hired me just for that. That was challenging. Um, but yeah, I mean, sometimes it's like, or like the abstract will have 300 words and you have to cut it to 250 or something like that. But a lot of that can be done easily just with streamlining and being more concise. And it's not too difficult to do when you have to.
Yeah, I assume that work can come in a variety of, like if you get somebody whose English isn't their first language, their grammar is going to be a lot rougher. Um, so you just kind of take a hit sometimes when
Yeah, so that's a good question. So, I've quoted for you, like what I tend to make per hour, $150 an hour or whatever. And that is very much an average, right? Nowadays it is, and so I track my time. I use Clockify to track my time. I have an Excel spreadsheet, and I actually give you this template in the course, where I track what my hourly rate ends up being for each project. And in the beginning, that was really helpful because I was working for a handful of editing agencies and book publishers, and I was able to see that consistently I was making $40 an hour for the book publishers. Even though the writing was cleaner, I still had to do a lot of other formatting and other work that was adding time to the projects. Whereas for some of these other editing agencies, they paid not very much and the writing was much worse. But I was making $100 an hour there. And so even though I loved editing books, I ended up cutting them from my roster because it just wasn't worth the money. I wasn't making enough to make the time worth it. And I had more private clients coming in and that sort of thing. So you do get that variation from project to project. But, when you track your time and your earnings and your rate and all that, you end up seeing what it averages out to. And so if you find that, you take much longer to edit a certain kind of project, you can just not take them on anymore if you find that it's not worth it and you have extra work to fill your time. All right. Well, like I said, we have 8 spots available for the March cohort. It's 12 weeks, so that is going to run March, April, May. And I find that it is, by the time, I mean, I've had people, you saw in some of these testimonials that I've had people who join the course and they enroll like a month or two before their cohort starts and they've already landed jobs before we even start the cohort. Or they start the cohort and they start applying to agencies and I had one student who got hired at a publisher and an agency within 2 weeks of starting. And so the whole purpose of this course is to show you exactly the steps you need to take so that you cut out all of that agonizing Googling and research and all of that stuff that I went through and tested. Now I'm sharing my knowledge with you so that you don't have to go through that. Because it can be a bit of torture to search for remote work editor and try to figure out what's a scam and what's not. So if you think that will be helpful, I'm happy to answer any other questions now, or if you think of something later, you can email me. I'll put my email in the chat here. And keep in mind, you do have those 3 spots available. And, before tomorrow, if you'd like to enroll, you'd get the free 60-minute coaching session with me that you can book anytime before the end of the cohort. And also the free essential skills course, which people have said is super helpful because, like I said, it just walks you through formatting and editing the dissertation, shows you exactly what you have to do so you don't have to try to figure it out on your own. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you for being here. Good luck to you. I'd love to hear about from the person who got the editing request. Send me an email and let me know about it. And I hope to see you in our March group. All right. Bye.
Thank you.